W. Ready? The work session of the Annapolis City Council for Thursday, July 18th, 2019 will be called to order at 3:15. Thank you for your patience. I got caught in a little traffic. At this time, would everyone willing and able please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance?
Beat Army.
Before tonight's presentation, I have a little news for this body. Last night, City Manager Teresa Sutherland informed you that I will be submitting the 3 names for City of Annapolis Public Safety Team to the Council for consideration and confirmation. I'm very pleased today to introduce this team to you. They are Edward C. Jackson for Police Chief, Doug Romali for Fire Chief, and Kevin Simmons for Director of the newly created Office of Emergency Management Department. Teresa put forth some dates for you to meet individually or in a group setting to get to better acquainted with Mr. Jackson before his confirmation hearing. We have requested a hearing date for all 3 at a special City Council meeting now set for Wednesday, July 31st at 3 p.m. I have already formally requested that date from the City Clerk, and Teresa has submitted the nomination paperwork. If the 3 men receive confirmation from this body, I'll move forward to swear in the Police Chief and the OEM Director on the same day on July 31st. The plan is to swear in the Fire Chief, once the current Chief, David Stokes, steps down in late August. As promised to the community, my office will host a community meeting to introduce the new team to the public on Monday, July 29th at 7 p.m. at Pip Moyer Recreation Centre. I am extending a personal invitation to all of you as well as the public to attend that meeting. As promised to you and the community, we're informing you as soon as we are able to do so in the process. My office has made every attempt to keep the public informed as we moved through the community meetings, advertising the position and job description meetings with candidates and winnowing down to the final names. There is always a delicate balance between maintaining the privacy of individual candidates who have other positions and a need for confidentiality, and our desire to have a process that is open and transparent. Before I give an overview of the candidates, I'd like to take a moment to thank our Acting Police Chief, Paul Herman. Could you please stand, Paul? He stepped up and professionally led the department, providing continuity in operations. I'd also like to thank Chief Stokes, who will retire from the city effective September 1, after a decade of service committed to the safety of our residents. Is he out there? No. He's already leaving. All right. Now, let me give you an overview of each of the candidates and their qualifications. Police Chief Edward Jackson, 60. Beginning his career as a police officer in Baltimore City in 1983, moving up the ranks from police officer in 1983 to colonel in 2002. He has been a program director and assistant professor in criminal justice programs at Baltimore City Community College. In 2018, he was rehired by the Baltimore Police Department as Chief Office of Inspector General to provide an agency-wide oversight of administration and operational practices of the Baltimore Police Department. Jackson served as a member of the Community Oversight Task Force, charged with making recommendations for strengthening police accountability and police community relations in Baltimore City. He has a PhD candidate in Capella University, where he is completing his dissertation. He has a Master's of Science in Applied Behavioural Science from Johns Hopkins University and a Bachelor in Science and Criminal Justice from Copen State University. Fire Chief Douglas Romali, 52, has worked his entire career from the City of Annapolis, in the City of Annapolis Fire Department, competitively moving up the ranks from firefighter medic in 1986 to Deputy Chief in 2007. He retired in 2017 before being rehired as Deputy Chief, where he plans, directs and administers all programs in the Fire Department. Romali has a Master's of Science in Management from Johns Hopkins University, a Bachelor's in Science in Fire Science from the University of Maryland. OEM Director Kevin Simmons, 61, has been a Deputy Fire Chief. You guys liking that I'm giving you ages away here? For the City of Annapolis Fire Department since 2010, following a 27-year career with the Howard County Department of Fire and Rescue. As Deputy Chief, he has overseen the Office of Emergency Management and served as the City Director of Office of Emergency Management. Simmons possesses a Master's in Arts of Legal Studies from the University of Baltimore and a Bachelor of Science in Behavioural Science from the University of Maryland. He has been the Deputy Fire Chief and Director of the Office of Emergency Management Division in the Annapolis Fire Department since 2010. We look forward to a speedy confirmation process because we're looking forward to having this strong team in place, and let's hear it one more time for them. Thank you. Ms. City Attorney, please present the first item on the agenda.
First item on the agenda is ID 511219, the Board of Supervisors of Elections.
Yeah. Oh, can I just get a photo with everybody up here? So, sorry. Humour me for a second here, will you?
Gavin, quick question.
Yes.
When will we have the opportunity to ask questions to you, Teresa, them about the process?
Yeah, you'll get one-on-one meetings with each of the candidates, and whenever you're ready to ask.
Oh, amongst the group, though.
Okay. Of the process, of the selection process?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll get you with Teresa whenever you want. Or did you have some questions you want to ask us now? Go ahead.
So you are welcome to have one-on-one meetings with the candidates or in groups, of course, less than a quorum. On the night of the confirmation, it is a public hearing where if you wish to deliberate and ask questions, you certainly can. We're happy to answer any questions you have in advance if that helps provide you with the information that you need to make a decision.
Yeah, so it's down to this group, this body here to decide, so you need time to ask those questions. How you all doing? Sorry about that. Thank you so much.
We're doing well, thank you. Thanks very much for affording us some time this afternoon. We're pleased to be here. I want to extend a hearty thank you to everybody here, as well as Alderman Rodriguez, who's not here right now. I thought about teasing you, saying that we made a mistake. There's another report you have to file in 2 weeks, but I won't torture you. Having gone through that, congratulations, Alderman Gay. But it's a good lead-in to why we're here. We had already begun working on one of the prime objectives we had after the last election cycle, and that was to look at how we might be able to advance the city of Annapolis to something other than a dated, paper-bound campaign reporting process. And the advent of this special election, everything came with that, simply highlights why that would be nice to have. As we indicated at the city council meeting a couple months back, the city does expend a fair amount of money every 4-year cycle on auditors who review the campaign reports, as well as city council time that is spent, or not city council time, excuse me, the city clerk's time, receiving and uploading and tracking all the reports that are received to the tune of at least 20 or 25,000, every 4-year cycle. We're looking at something which may not free the money entirely from the city, but something which we think will move us into the year 2020. We're here now because this is the kind of thing that needs enabling legislation. So if this is something that we proceed on, we need to have the blessing of City Council, and that blessing needs to be provided before we reach January of 2020, because it's going to need to hit the legislature. So that's why we're here. My compatriots, Eileen, they can introduce themselves. Brianna's done a lot of work on the presentation we're going to show you on what we think is one good alternative on how to deal with campaign reporting. As a quick aside, this is not the only thing that you're going to see from us, I think, over the course of the next few months. City code still requires a fair amount of updating in regard to election law to bring it in line with where the county or the state is. So look for us to be presenting a fair amount of changes in that regard as well. All of those need to be in place by the summer of 2020 to be ready for the next cycle in the city of Annapolis. So a few things on the plate, but this is the most pressing, and I think of tremendous value not only for you all, any future candidates, and to the citizens of Annapolis to have an easier way of taking a look at what's going on with campaign reporting. I'm done. I'll turn it over. Thank you.
Do you want to go over the financial aspect of it?
In what regard?
Difference in cost and whatnot.
We'll recap that.
Okay.
Okay, so a few months ago, we actually sat for a subcommittee to it's on. I just don't talk loud. Is this better? Okay, no, I can hear myself, so that's definitely better. Okay, so a few months ago, we sat before one of the subcommittees going over the prospect of switching to the Maryland State Finance campaign reporting system. Did a very rough overview of what the information that we had thus far in talking with Jared of the State Board of Elections and what would be required. The site is fairly simple. I know I did a few months ago send to Regina to send to you all the link for the overview, which this is an hour-long video. Feel free to go through, paste that yourselves. I can send that out as well, but it goes step by step in setting up an account, how to fill out forms, how things get generated, etc. And I'll do kind of a preliminary situation here and show you what that looks like. So if we go back here.
So folks, it's up on the screen behind you.
Well, they've got,
Yeah.
oh, they got one
Or
there.
is it elsewhere?
Yeah.
All right.
Oh, it's not on that one. So starting here, this is the home page for people who are not a part of a committee that will be taking contributions, or a candidate's campaign, a committee that will be taking contributions. There is this section on the left-hand side for disclosures, which will allow people to, including the general public, like this is what people use at this level now, to look up committees, candidates, and check people's campaign finance reports. So I pulled up, Sarah Elfreth was the first person that came to my mind since I was recently talking with her, and so I pulled her up. You can, I will backspace out of this. If you start to type a candidate's name, it'll start to populate all of the committees, and it will include those that are closed and those that are active. So as you can see here, hers is still active. You can also then, if it's a common name, filter by election cycle, election type. This one goes pretty far back. Report type, date ranges, et cetera, if you really want to minimize just how much comes up.
May we ask questions as we go, or do you want to wait till the end?
I'm okay with it as we go, so you don't forget the question.
What do you mean by committees? Is that like my campaign committee?
Like a campaign committee.
Not a central committee, but
like a campaign finance.
anybody who has to file a report is considered a committee?
Correct. You can specify, hold on one second, let me go over here. So I'll go back one on here. Nope, come on. Why are you like this?
It's like it's going in a loop on
That's
you.
weird. Okay, let's go back. We'll go back to the main page. So I don't want disclosures. So if you do register committee, I'll go back to this one. So you can pick whether it's a candidate committee, if you're running as a slate, PACs and super PACs, et cetera. So that's how you would register that way. And anyone who has registered on this site and has to submit reports would be able to be pulled up.
So, for example, my treasurer would have to go into this system
Correct.
and register me as a candidate.
Correct.
Okay, and then it'll walk her through.
Correct.
Okay.
So so if you do candidate committee to register one, it'll walk you through everything that is required. We will require, since we are our own municipality, differences in, or funding limits and all of that. So a lot of this will be modified to suit our code versus the state's, but it would walk you through. So it's got your general information here, and then when you click continue, it takes you to the screen that I had pulled up before, but specified for candidate committee registration. And on the back end for us, we're able to, which is hard to see up here. Let me see if I can zoom in here. There is this here, the little asterisk for each one. We can decide what is required and what is not.
So a good way of thinking about it, in part by the treasurer coming in here to enter the information, is that those little annoying gotchas. Oh golly, you didn't put the code in here for this contribution, or you missed this on that. This will guide you through and do away with those nuisance kinds of mistakes and errors that are natural oversights that folks make from time to time, and this will be a tremendous help with that.
Yeah, yes, that's one of the comments I was going to make. It'll reduce a lot of needs for amendment, because that would be everything that we require or that we'd be looking out for. We'd mark it as required. So if you do not have it filled in, it will not let you submit it. It would.
This just completely eliminates the paper process?
Correct.
Okay.
It will, if we would like to generate paper, it will convert it to a PDF and you can print it if you would like.
You may
But other than that, no paper. Which these two, I know he mentioned kind of in the intro, the city clerk's office time and what has been our time in the last few months going over reports and was required. That will diminish quite significantly as well, because of the required aspect that we're able to put into this and how we're able to set it up. So in talking with Jared earlier, going through, we'll be going through and seeing what differences there are between state and city of Annapolis, and specifying what modifications will be needed for at least for our volume and our section of what would be a part of the state system. As far as the paper,
I just want to mention real quick, because Brianna's dealing with the Maryland system. We're approaching this as showing you the Maryland system. It doesn't mean necessarily, because we're still working out, it would require some legislation. So as you're looking at this, there are several choices. One would be to do nothing with the campaign finance reporting as it is now. One would be to update forms, just do something quick and dirty. Or another one would be the city IT department looking into something like that. So this is really the best system that we've looked at, but it would need some adjustment for the city. And it also would require legislation and some upfront money too. So just to give you some background as far as how we came to this. but there are other options, but we do need to know which way to go.
Have you considered this before? Is this the first time you've gone there on this?
Yeah,
Yep.
yes.
And how long ago did the county move to a digital system?
Well,
I don't know
they've
the answer
been
to that.
they've had a system for quite a while. The state legislature mandates that all the counties use it, and also the city of Baltimore. So, in order for another I can never say the word municipality to go forward with it, it would need actually the legislature would need to approve it first, and then of course there would be the negotiations as far as how much it would cost to do the amendment, amending it and implementing it. So. As Brianna continues to go through it, I just wanted you to know that this was one way of approaching it, but we do need to have guidance fairly soon, as Cliff mentioned, in terms of meeting deadlines for the legislature and also allocation of funding.
Okay, so as far as registering, this one is for participating organizations. Just another showing of the one I showed before as far as the candidate committee goes. This one just looks a little different. It does allow for additional contacts, treasurer, authorized agents, principal officers, etc., and all of that information populates at the bottom as well. As far as the output, when you are trying to submit a report, and if something is either missing, incorrect, or unfilled, it files it as a failed report, and so that is a letter and the fine is automatically generated, and that flags it for the city clerk's office to be able to reach out to you and let you know what the issue was, and to be able to remedy it as soon as possible, instead of the delay of receiving all the reports when the time comes for them to be able to actually sit down and review them all, and then have it be however long later that you find out that there's something that needs to be amended.
Question, does it lock you out if you're late?
That I will double check. We can set I know that is a feature, that was something I asked Jared, that is a feature that we can enable as far as having it lock out. So if it comes, 11:59 seconds, if you hit send a little second too late, it can lock you out.
Okay, thank you.
So would you also pay the fees electronically instead of going downstairs?
I will have to double check with them on that.
You can, but
I'm pretty sure you would still have to make that out to the city. As far as output, I will zoom in on this one. As far as paper goes, this is an example of the forms that it generates. So as far as it gives a summary sheet, which is similar to our summary sheet with the list out of aggregations, expenditures, receipts, etc. I know some of you even provide it to us in kind of an Excel format, and this kind of already does that for you. And then going down, I'll go a little bit slower. Again, these are sections that we'd be able to mark required so that they aren't missed or need to be amended later. As you can see, date received, similar to what we already have on our paperwork. And then this is actually what I was talking about earlier. Failure to provide all the information required will be regarded as a failure to file. So that would generate the fine, and also there also is an ability for the Office of Law to set up where it already goes on the paperhead for and the letter is generated for that as well for the city to send out. But yeah, I can scroll through this if you would like, but this is the gist of it. And then as there are amendments and changes, as you can see here, there's a different color coding for each one. So as things are fixed, you can see where there were the changes as needed, or whatever errors and whatnot there were. And then when it's amended, it's also watermarked in the back as an amendment, so that there's no confusion whether or not it was the original or not.
Can you roll down there a little slowly so I can write some of those contributor names down for myself?
Oh, poor Sarah. But yeah, there's that. And I will pull this up as well. And like I said, I can send this link out as well. It's about an hour tutorial, but it does a very slow, specific walkthrough of every aspect of the campaign finance system. I'm not sure what else to say about it. I found it pretty helpful, even though I've used the site before to look into people's campaign finance.
Thank you.
But
Alderman
yeah,
Savage, yeah.
that's really all I got.
Well, thank you for the presentation. And I do have a question, just thinking about, I guess, the
transparency part of it, the public's interaction with this. They'll be able to log on and get all this information. And can they, for example, can they or we just plug in and do a search based on an election cycle? So if we wanted to bring up all the reports for all candidates for whatever, 2017
So,
election, could we do that?
Yep, so I'll go back to here, actually.
But the city code requires to keep it for 5 years, I believe. So you can do that on the website now.
I'm just, yeah, I mean, what I'm getting at is I just want to see if you can bring it up all at once, or if you have to know what specific name or campaign to search for.
Yeah, so here, and we can actually test that out if you'd like. The username aspect of it would be, and I just wanted to point this out, on the right-hand side would be, like, for each of you all, your finance committee, that would be the login for you to be able to do your information, and then this left-hand side is for the general public to be able to look up information. So, I mean, is there anything for anyone specifically, I guess, that you wanted to look up while we're here? Because we can test that out as far as pulling them up. The one that I pulled up for Sarah, like I just pulled up by her name. I didn't even choose an election cycle or anything, but you can select it. So since I only put her name, it brought up all of hers. So we've got page 1 and then going all the way back. Okay, so there is only page 1. I don't know why I listed page 2. But going back to when she first filed and submitted a report. So we'll do.
And so you're looking for
Here.
feedback from us in terms of our thoughts on selecting this versus...
Not necessarily this per se, but there will be some expenditure required ultimately to go this path. We know we'll need to present you with something a little bit more formal in the fall on taking this kind of a path. We'll see whether or not the Annapolis City IT department feels they can create it on their own. There's always the question about, why replicate if it's already someplace else, but because it will, particularly this path, will require enabling legislation, we're going to need to get our hands around that in the fall, because the legislature will need to have it, and we'll obviously need to have the support of the city council to move on that. Right now I don't have exact numbers for you, and we would be passing those to you, I think, probably by September. I hope, which would give you...
For cost?
Yeah.
I have rough estimates for cost. I spoke with Jared earlier today. We're going to go over volume, voter registration, et cetera, to see what the portion of the state system the city of Annapolis would be responsible for. But if we were to go through the same contractor that the state of Maryland used, which is called TT and Notorian, they have like a joint contract with the state. The initial investment for that contract ranges between $50,000 to $100,000, depending on the volume, plus the cost of maintenance, security, etc. Versus going through the state. The rough estimate that Jared gave me based on his monthly cost for security and the rough volume that he had in mind for the city of Annapolis was between $12,000 and $15,000 a year.
I'm sorry, could you
So the 12 to
repeat that?
15 is the operational number we're talking about.
Correct.
Yeah.
I didn't catch that beginning
So
number.
50 to 100?
No.
But no,
The
50 to 100 for that.
if the city of Annapolis goes through it gets its own contract with the same contractor that the state uses, they require an initial investment based on volume, which can range between $50,000 and $100,000. Plus, there's the cost of annual maintenance, security, the same cost that the state has now through their contract.
And they
So
said
it's an
that was
initial-
about 12. They said
But we're
So
not
it's an
asking,
initial
That's not-
outlay
that-
of $50,000 to $100,000.
but we're not asking for that.
That's not what we're asking for.
We're
That is-
asking to see if we can move forward on engaging the Maryland system so that we could use the Maryland system, or have the city create their own system if they felt that they could do it, or an upgrade of what we're currently doing. Or we just continue with a paper system that we upgrade as best we can. So
So you're not asking us to go with the existing, going with the existing contractor is one of the options.
Let me try to make an attempt to recap this. The question is, piggybacking might be a better phrase than thinking about it. Piggybacking off the state at an initial investment of 12 to 15K to piggyback off the state for setup and so forth.
That's annual cost.
12 to
Annual cost.
15 a year.
Correct.
12 to 15.
Piggybacking off of the state.
Or two, the city creates something and the city uses something, or three, we stay with the paper. So, those are, I think, the choices that we're looking at right now. Right now, we spend, again, in an election cycle, we spend at least 20, if not 25,000, and that's in a 4-year cycle. So if the costs hold to piggyback off the state at 12 to 15 per year, that is ultimately an increase probably in net cost to the city, but it is also a far superior way of handling campaign reporting. And staff time.
With no $50,000 to $100,000.
No,
route.
that was when I discussed that. That is for if we went the route that the state of Maryland did in establishing a relationship with the contractor. That would be the cost to us if we went separately to that contractor and said we want to do the same thing the state of Maryland does. Versus if we piggyback off of the state of Maryland, running about $15,000 a year instead.
And we
of,
don't think the state of Maryland's going to charge us some initial outlay?
We do.
We do.
Right.
But what's the initial outlay we think the state's going to charge us if we were to go that route?
That's not what I was told, but I will double check with Jared on that.
My understanding was that there will be some initial outlay, so that we have some of the questions we haven't necessarily asked because we felt that we needed to get permission from the council to start moving forward in that direction, if that's the direction that the council wants us to move in. They own the system, so it's not something, so we can negotiate just directly with them. But again, it's getting guidance from you all in terms of, do we proceed towards the Maryland system and investigate that more closely, or is there something that the city wants to do separately, either through the IT department, or do we continue basically with a paper system that we upgrade as best we can?
So if I might, I had a conversation with Barb Smith yesterday. We're trying to get away from the city trying to develop its own software for things. So I don't think that's an avenue we want to choose. And, if it were me, I'd want to know how much how much would it be? That's going to tell me whether I pursue that avenue or I stay with paper filings. So,
Well, we can move in that direction if you give us permission to go ahead and go that route.
Okay. Alderman Tierney?
Oh, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just had a quick question as far as paper versus software. Is it a stagnant document, or does it have like a fail-safe method to say whether or not it's complete and move further?
If it is complete, it will allow you to submit it. If it is not complete, you will not be able to submit it.
There you go. Thank you.
Alderman Gay?
So even though the initial investment, if we were to go and do our own system with the city, would be higher, wouldn't the maintenance fees be lower annually because our staff will be doing it as opposed to like contracting?
I don't know if I'm in the right one to answer the question because I'm answering on behalf of the city's IT department. But oftentimes, if you're going to create your own homegrown system, it's not unusual to have them look cheap initially but be more expensive in the long term, particularly if it's not an area of expertise that one has. If it's an area of expertise that you already have and you're just extending it, then it makes some sense. If it's a whole new thing that you normally don't do as an entity, it doesn't necessarily make sense then to create that as an area of expertise that you have and divert your other IT resources to maintaining the system. So that's my feeling in response to it, but I'm not the Annapolis IT department.
The cheaper of the three options would either be to stick with the paper system we have now or piggyback off of the state system based on our volume for the municipality.
Alderman Savage?
Well, so do the counties, do they have to pay, are they required to pay the state as well for using this?
Yeah, I don't know the answer to the question. I know they're required to do it. I don't know if they have an allocation that goes to contribute towards the expenses to the state or not, but I'll find out.
I mean, I think we should talk to our delegation because it seems kind of ridiculous for them to charge the jurisdiction to use this. It's for the betterment of our elections and transparency.
It was my understanding in speaking with Jared that since at the county level they're required to report their stuff to the state because they already use that system, and so since they're already required, it's not like they're asking specifically for their county to be able to use it or their municipality to be able to use it because they're required to.
I mean, it's essentially their system.
Right.
The counties that make up Maryland, it's essentially their system.
Because there's no, especially for software, standpoint, there's no real continued cost for them. If we're paying them per year, we're not getting all that much from them in terms of, and they don't have to really do all that much work once it's put in the system. It's pretty much all automated, I would assume. But anyway, I think it warrants more of a discussion.
Alderman Finlayson?
Yes, thank you. Well, kind of piggybacking on Alderman Savage, are there other municipalities that are using the state system now?
City of Baltimore.
The City of Baltimore? So they have some experience with municipalities using, piggybacking on their system?
I think that's a
Yes
good
and-
question in
yeah.
terms of how they've allocated their code, and we could certainly ask that. Because when we talk with Jared, our code would have to be, this would have to be modified to meet our code. So I would imagine they've done that for Baltimore, but that's a good question, and we can certainly ask that and find out a little bit
The only
more about
thing,
it.
as far as the different with the city of Baltimore, is they're also their own legislative district at the state level, so they would need to do that anyway. Whereas everywhere else is at a county level. Baltimore City is separate from Baltimore County, so they would have to have that separate aspect for themselves as well, since they're technically a city and not a county like the other.
So do counties pay into the state for their use of the
That
system?
was the Alderman's question, and
Right.
I suspect not, but I
I
don't
didn't
know.
understand that,
That's my
yeah,
guess as well.
okay. I've got two more questions. The second one is there a maintenance fee even on years that we don't hold elections?
Those are some questions we don't have all the answers on right now. If I hear where you're going, certainly if
Okay.
there's one campaign report required a year, what kind of expense would you expect to have to pay if that's all you've got?
Right.
Right.
And my third and last question, you mentioned that this was one program that's out there. Will you look to see if there are other options for us other than this particular one?
I had not. We can. The issue we run in with that is we would be doing that solely ourselves, as far as instead of not piggybacking off of the state, which means there is a much higher, especially initial cost required. Like the 50 to 100,000 that I was mentioning, if we contracted ourselves with the same contractor the state uses, versus piggybacking off of it. There's a lot more of that cost with us establishing our own relationship, our own contracts, et cetera, instead of piggybacking off of one that already exists.
So potentially it could be considerably
It would-
more expensive.
yeah.
And I know you all are volunteers, so I
So
appreciate.
there is some incentive on the part of the state of Maryland in terms of us adapting this, because it also does cut down on some of their cost because of the new legislature also that requires you all to be filing your reports to them. And so should that occur, they already have it. So it's kind of a double bonus in regards from your perspective, but they're also motivated by that too, because they're spending staff time tracking you all down and communicating with us too. I think another real point is the decrease in terms of workload that it would allow the city clerk to decrease, because it's really, we did do a kind of a rough draft. I mean, we were looking at almost $30,000 when you look at the auditor's costs, and then you start adding in staff time, when the city clerk is bringing the reports in, checking them, putting them on the website, sending letters out, putting new amendments. It really is very staff intensive, and so that's something that's a little harder to capture, but I think that you all can appreciate how much time it can be, and so that needs to be figured into this also. There would be some review. The state does like a random review that their staff will pull certain reports and just do a check, and that's certainly something I imagine the city clerk could do, or this body could do it also.
And this is not the city clerk's primary job.
No, it's not.
Thank you.
No. Are there any other questions? We're not looking for you to say, yes, go spend the money today, but as indicated earlier, we wanted you to see this is what at least one of the things we're looking at. We'd like to see if we can get out of the paper reporting process, and the question is, can this happen at a price which is acceptable to the city of Annapolis? And if so, we've got to be sure that we have your cooperation and enabling legislation. We have to pass something here and then get to the state. So at this juncture, I see nodding of heads. Do you all want to get on a paper?
Yes, yes.
If we can do it for the city and the citizens at a reasonable expense.
Yep.
So we'll proceed on this path, working with the state at least, on fine-tuning everything that we've got right now, where this looks like, what the costs look like, maybe even getting to the point of perhaps what a contract might look like, so we can get a better picture of what the true expense would be. And we'll still follow up with the city just to reconfirm that, this doesn't make sense or does make sense for the IT team here to do anything on their own.
So we all want to personally thank you for the tireless work that you do. We are very lucky to have you, so thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Madam City Clerk, next item on the agenda.
Next item on the agenda is ID 51319, ULI Action Committee update.
Thank you.
Supposed to believe that guy there? And the guy next to him, I won't even talk about.
Aha. Good afternoon. We're delighted to be here. And I am one of the co-chairs, along with Bill Kardash, of the City Dock Action Committee. And we have today with us Robert Clark, CEO and President of Historic Annapolis, Bill Kardash, who is chair of the Historic Annapolis Board. We have Karen Brown, who is close by, Ron Jarashow, Susie Smith, Brian and Teresa. These are all part of this team. With me speaking to you today will be Leo Wilson, who is one of the team chairs for the design team, Ian Pfeiffer, parking team, and John Hammond, financial tools. What we're excited about today and over the last, it's really just been 3 months, this effort started the end of March, is that there have been an incredible amount of exciting ideas, but perhaps most importantly, I was saying before the meeting to Ross, what's great about living in Annapolis, and sometimes we forget this, is that the city is full of people who are committed, who love to be here, who choose to be here, and who are committed to making a difference. Some of those people who are on the team are in the audience today, including our former Mayor Hillman. We have a large group of residents, most of them from Ward 1, but some from other parts of the city, City Dock business representatives, financial experts, parking experts, resiliency experts, people from the arts and musicians on the programming team, the maritime industry, preservationists, environmentalists. All of these people have spent an incredible amount of time, both in terms of outreach to their own constituencies and in trying to think through what they've heard from the public on how to make this work. So this is what we have. And when you look at this picture, it says it all. This is our town center. This is our 100% corner. And take a look at it. It is a sea of asphalt, a sea of parking, There are a couple trees there. When you look out at Susan Campbell has a little circle of trees. The rest of it is just, could be the moon. And look at the location. We're right on the Chesapeake Bay. You've got drop-dead gorgeous views. And this is what it looks like. Parts of it are dilapidated and unkept, but perhaps most urgently is that we have an immediate challenge. Just since 2013, the days that it floods at City Dock have gone from 38 to 52. So what that means for all of us is that we have an opportunity, because we have to deal with this. This is not something that we can ignore. And what are we going to do with this great opportunity? Well, one option would be to do another plan. And as you all know, we have had 8 plans since 1987. I was involved in 3 of them: Maritime, Ward 1, Cultural Resource Hazard Mitigation, the City Dock Plan. We have lots of information, lots of research, lots of analysis. So the City Dock Action Committee, hence the name, agreed that their goal is not to have a plan that sits on a shelf. Their goal is to give you, council, very clear, immediate and mid-range action items and strategies so that you can take this and go forward. When we started, the Action Committee agreed to 5 straightforward principles, which we took from the Urban Land Institute report that came out the end of January. One is that everyone wants a pedestrian experience. They want a green space, community space, access to the water. Secondly, it's as important as what we create is to make sure that we maintain the viability of the City Dock businesses and the high quality of life and livability of those adjacent residential neighborhoods. That's as important as anything else we do. No net loss of parking was a position we've started with, and everyone has maintained that. In terms of what will be the character in the field, we heard from the community, we heard from everybody on the Action Committee, the authentic character, our maritime heritage, our view sheds. We need to honor all of that, and we do that by starting with the assumption that we are not changing the height and the massing of the building envelope, and of course fix the flooding. The process, so we started with these principles. You have 90 people. How do you move forward in a 6-month period? And the process has 2 paths. Don't you love these diagrams? They're completely unreadable. But anyhow, but they look good. 2 paths. The bottom path is the 9 teams that we established. We had a little bit more than 90 people on the Action Committee, which was up from the original number of 12 I was told that I would have on the Action Committee. So we went from 12 to 90. And when I thought about it, this is an incredible resource. This is a department of 90 top-notch, eager, enthusiastic, sharp people who love the city. So we organized them into 9 teams, and those teams met and hashed out issues amongst themselves, between teams. Resiliency met with finance, parking met with business, and then they also did their own outreach to their own constituencies. For example, the programming team met with people from the arts community, maritime team met with a variety of people in the maritime industry, and so on. The other path forward was the community outreach. Extensive community outreach was the direction from the mayor and the city. They wanted to make sure that everybody in the city had a voice in this. So the community outreach, again, this is a timeline basically starting the end of March, Community outreach included a workshop with Ward 1, which was a great workshop. We had, I don't know, we had like 60 people there. It was fantastic. A workshop with the city dock businesses. The mayor was at that one. A workshop last night, the Burtis Group held, Burtis House Group, surveys at city dock, outreach by each individual committee, and then a large citywide workshop May 6th. And we will be having another one of those workshops the end of September. And at that workshop, we had somewhere between 225, 250 people. The comments were set a direction. And what was the most amazing about all of it is that we got a tremendous amount of energy and enthusiasm. I was surprised. I've been at, I don't know, probably thousands, I was going to say hundreds, thousands of workshops. People were excited. They were like, yes, we want to see something happen. We have pages and upon pages of comments, but the themes, we want active green space. We want to be able to access the water. We want family activities, no net loss of parking, fix the flooding, and something that we did not have in our initial principles. We heard a lot about celebrating Annapolis's diverse cultural history. So with all of that input went into the teams, and then the 9 teams, the end of May and the end of June, reported out and interacted with all the other teams for them to hear the individual design, parking, maritime, preservation, to hear their direction. But the goal for all of them was a goal of creating a vibrant and exciting place that all Annapolitans can enjoy and be proud of. So I am going to very quickly, and this is so superficial, but just because there are reams of material from each of these teams, and I will be glad to meet with any of you on more detail, but to just give you a very quick overview, the Maritime team was really concerned about access both to the water and from the water, how to make this a better experience and how to celebrate our maritime history. We call the Thriving Local Businesses another great team. We have 12 people on this team, local business owners, property owners, and they focused on the fact that they need to first and foremost focus on the locals, making sure they can have the local community want to use and become customers of their businesses, but also what about the season that takes place after October? Their main recommendations had to do with creating a flexible and adaptable market for the off-season periods of time. They also had recommendations when they met with other city dock businesses. They had recommendations about coming together with businesses on Main Street and City Dock with their own organization. The programming and community access, this was an amazing group of people who were musicians, artists, and they had very detailed programming recommendations, but the thrust of it was it should be multi-generational, family programming, and it should be diverse and affordable so that everyone in the city can come down and enjoy this. The Burtis Group, Burtis House team, was primarily preservationists, and what they looked at in a great amount of detail is that the historic significance of the Burtis House, which you can see right there, is tied not to the structure, but to its waterfront location. So their recommendations were to keep the location, keep the Burtis House where it is, not move it, have an exterior easement, and they had a lot of specific recommendations about resiliency factors that need to be addressed. The community character and livability group was 8 residents, 7 of whom lived in Ward 1. They did a lot of the outreach, a lot of surveys. They came up with detailed, I want to say over 100 recommendations. The thrust of it is, how do we enhance the livability for our neighborhoods? How do we create a place at City Dock that we all want to be a part of? How do we have a pedestrian family focus and keep Annapolis authentic? Resiliency, we have Zoe Johnson here, who was very active on the resiliency and flooding team. She is with the Naval Academy, and a lot of their efforts were to coordinate with the resiliency plans of the Naval Academy. They came forward with detailed recommendations about an infrastructure-based approach for shore protection, flood protection, stormwater management, but also a regulatory approach, adaptive strategies, emergency responses, land use plans, codes, environmental plans. And with that said, there are 3 other teams, and I am going to have them talk with you directly. First, you'll be hearing from Leo Wilson, who will talk to you about the development of a consensus plan.
Eileen, thanks. Members of the council, thank you for having us today. So Eileen ran through in about 10 minutes what's taken about 6 months to put together. And I think we have to keep an eye on what we're trying to accomplish here. We've got a space downtown that has, not performed at a level that's commensurate with what we're hoping for the future of Annapolis. And so it seems like the right time to take stock of where we are and what we need to accomplish to be a better place. And so all of these people have volunteered their time and efforts to try and help come to what we're going to call this consensus plan. And as you all know, there are so many different user groups that have different concerns. And so the design committee is tasked with taking the information that's been gathered over this period of time, evaluating the prior attempts to try and organize this space, and take into account the new challenges for things like sea level rise and resiliency. And at the same time, preserve the needs for people like our business users downtown to be successful. So what we know doesn't work so well is the sea of parking. What we know is going to work well is probably anything else. What we've got to start out with are a few slides of what we'll call precedent images. And here you'll see some things that we're considering in the design committee, and you'll see abundance of green space added to places that are in urban environments. You'll see some attempts to change elevation to help deal with sea level rise. You'll see more pedestrian-friendly areas and less automobile-friendly areas, keeping in mind we still have to deal with the car because we're not quite through with it yet. Let's go to the next one. Gathering places are a big thing that we hear over and over again. Where are we going to come together, not just for tourists, but for people who live in town here, and try and make places that we can use both during the high season and during the off season, I'll call it, when many of our tourist friends are not here. And so these open areas that provide space for us to interact on all different levels are a big part of what we're trying to do. This diagram represents what was, I'll say, an initial attempt to organize the space and deal with some of these challenges. Now, what the design team has done is we've met on several occasions over the last several months and started to diagram out some potential changes we can make here that still provide for some of the core elements, for instance, the boat show to succeed and some of the other important businesses downtown. So the diagram that you're looking at, again, this will be revised at least once and probably several more times, but the idea is to take the things we're hearing from these groups and address each of them to the best of our ability and change the character of the place we're talking about to something that's going to work better. So I'll start with the dashed line that you see go around the property, the black line. The idea is to create some type of an assembly that will allow us to deal with rising sea level, to provide some protection to the downtown and the areas that are lying low, and to provide not just a wall, but a space on each side of it that could be successful. It doesn't flood every day, but it does flood a lot and more. So you'll see there's still a connection for vehicular activity. There's still a good deal of parking, although some of it will need to move to other areas. There's a pedestrian-friendly promenade that's created that starts all the way by the Academy and ideally would continue all the way around to the Yacht Club. Now, that has some real challenges once we get to Fleet Reserve. We don't control those properties, and we're not sure how we're going to solve that. You'll see the line comes up between Fleet Reserve along Newman Street and comes back up to Compromise. So we're not going to solve all of the problems, but the idea here is reorganize this space to provide these green areas for people to interact, still maintain Susan Campbell Park as an open kind of harder surface area so that we can accommodate larger events there, and then provide green space between Susan Campbell and the Market House that's a little more pedestrian friendly, a little more user friendly. These are kind of the starting principles for us to try and reorganize it. Now, there's things that we're missing. You know, we still are not sure about the circle. The circle comes back, it comes and goes, and there's a lot of press that says, you know, the circle works better than the T, so that's still in play. We're not sure we have the wall in the right place. Are we protecting enough space, or are we sacrificing too much because it's easy? So we're going to look at whether or not that's in the right place. And in general, we're going to try and continue the dialogue with the other members of the group who did their last presentations the end of June, take that information, use that to impact this and make changes to this so that we can come back to the group and present an idea that addresses each of these pieces as best we can to build a consensus for a direction. Once we have that direction established, we'll come back to you with some recommendations about what we think is going to be the what we feel is the best overall diagram for how we can reconfigure the entire area around the city dock.
Leo, thank you so much. Ian.
Great. Nice to be with all of you. So I think in thinking about parking, and I got involved in this effort with a great group of folks on our work group. We have folks who are downtown business owners. We have folks who are sort of transportation and parking management experts from around the country, but are invested in what's happening here in the community. We have folks who've been involved in the city, serving on the planning commission in a variety of roles, and one old alderman. And we basically sort of tried to have a conversation about leaving aside the larger questions about Hillman, which I feel like from my time on the council, so much of any decision about anything downtown gets caught up in, well, let's sort of wait till we figure that out. And we tried to sort of take it from the lens of there are sort of parking resources now. We have sort of we have to create efficiencies in them if you were going to move forward with this vision in any way or any part of it. And the challenge is how do you sort of look at what's being done now and how to sort of using those sort of best policy expertise of folks who do parking management everywhere else in the country, sort of to make smarter decisions. So the core recommendation that comes out of that is really that we have a utilization problem and not a supply problem. And that really what we need to do in talking with the folks at the Department of Transportation, SP Plus, and a variety of other stakeholders and groups, it's clear that the sort of mix of the way we've traditionally done meters downtown, why do they stop at 9 o'clock? It's just how it's always been. Why do we have in front of mills short-term meters and other 2-hour meters everywhere? Do we have the right mix of that? So a lot of the questions that were raised from talking to those folks is, maybe you should take a step back and sort of do an analysis of that. Do we have that right mix? So there's a whole lot of the recommendations are related to sort of trying to figure out strategies, whether it is public information strategies around the resources, but really looking at sort of how folks approach the parking resources in town and driving folks to. If you can go back to the other slide, I'm sorry, I sort of was going off on a tangent there. But so really basically trying to figure out where those sort of intended users are for both on-street and off-street assets, and then creating a parking rate strategy that encourages people to park where it makes the most sense for them based on what their price point is and their tolerance to pay. and that you basically need an extended on-street parking fee collection and enforcement hours conversation, and that we really need to really look at those meters about that. You will not be surprised that what we heard from a meeting with a lot of residents, Ward 1 Resident Association, business owners, the issue about employee parking in Hillman, and sort of is that the best use. We've had these conversations. I have the scars to prove it from when we've dealt with this before. But I think there probably is some, sort of a fresh way of thinking about it, how other communities have dealt with this. Maybe there's a way, instead of sort of the stick, more of the carrot to incentivize people to move to another garage. Anything really, again, sort of in that lane, that if there is more flexibility in the parking supply where we traditionally have it, that might create incentives to move forward here. So it's clear that sort of the pieces that SP Plus runs for us, the AnnapolisParking.com, really needs sort of an update. And the question is, with our parking experts who've been on the committee, is that something that can be done under the current contract? How can that be sort of incentivized? But in a world where more and more people have do everything on a phone and an app, how are we reaching those folks when we have sort of a static website that doesn't seem to really grab people? There's clearly sort of technology and availability around sort of parking apps to communicate parking information. I know from my time on the council, a lot of that is, well, that's very expensive, and how do we get from here to there? But some of the folks who've been involved in our group, who have expertise in doing projects other places in the country, believe that there's sort of ways and resources they could bring, relationships they could bring to help us sort of move forward. And we're hopeful that really that basically at the end of this process, the recommendations are important, but there's no silver bullet here, right? The question is, can the people who've been involved in our group and with all these groups, can they turn into advocates for trying to help you figure out how to do some common sense solutions to this, so you can sort of get to a place to do it? Wayfinding is sort of a big piece of this. When I was on the council, we talked for a long time about trying to put money. There was money put in to try and do that. The whole connectivity of what happens further out on the state highway routes. There's been challenges in trying to get those monies freed. But, we heard from ADOT that's been a real challenge, but those dollars are there. There is sort of opportunities, so that we are hopeful that then our folks who have some relationships could be helpful in playing that out. As I understand, there was a great public hearing the other night about sort of autonomous vehicles, but even before we get to that, ride-hailing is sort of a growing issue, and sort of how do we have the right access for that so it's not blocking traffic or blocking parking spots? How do we think about that? And again, what's happening in other communities around the country? How are they figuring out how to sort of mark areas and enforce no standing elsewhere? I think that's something that sort of we need to really take a look at. Valet parking under SP Plus has been tried at different times. There's sort of mixed feelings about it, but it is certainly done in a lot of places, done effectively, especially at peak times, and it's something that we would think, in talking with SP Plus and with other folks in the community, there is interest in being able to help in that way. Obviously, it's not all about parking in cars. If there is a change on City Dock, there needs to be short-term bike storage near where the attractions where people are, and that's sort of been we've heard from folks in our groups who do a lot of have a lot of expertise in this space. It doesn't work if it's not sort of convenient to get people sort of out of their cars and onto bikes. The whole issue about sort of how people, as I was driving over here today, I watched two couples of tourists standing on the edge of the circle waiting for the cars to stop so they could, climb over the next railing. It happens all the time. The question is sort of, are the walk patterns as good as they could be? And if you're going to go in and make changes, maybe that's the moment to rethink about sort of pedestrian access. These are sort of, I think we touched on most of these, but we tried to branch them into sort of, as I said at the outset, what could be done in that frame of 6 months or a year, or a couple years in advance of whatever decision is made about Hillman. Hillman obviously is sort of going to be the near-term challenge for all of this, and hopefully, if done right, the long-term solution to a lot of these pressures. But so our desire was really to sort of raise some of these questions, and I think we found in having people who had some just to put a bow on this, to have some folks who have some national expertise and be able to sit with SP Plus and sit with Rick Gordon and his team. There's definitely an interest in things that could be done. I think the challenge really will be sort of how do you do it, and that's sort of what are hoping to help drive, so that it's realistic for you. And so I'll leave it there if you want to. Sure.
Thank you, Ian. Was SP Plus pretty receptive to some of the things that you all had suggested or were suggested as a result of what you've done in the report?
Yeah, I think they're interested in sort of what could be done, and they're interested in trying new things. And I think it's happening on a couple levels. The folks who administer the contract here seem interested and receptive in talking with Rick. But we have a couple folks involved in our group who deal with sort of parking stuff on a national level and deal with the higher ups people at SP Plus in Chicago, and who are saying, I'm happy to ask so someone at that level to come in and take a fresh look at what we're doing. And so in some ways those personal relationships are available to us to try and drive, to be able to cut through some of this, which I think would be great.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be back at a place where I spent too much time years ago. It's the Financial Tools Committee, not the Financial Fools Committee, for you folks that are hard of hearing. But we've looked at this at a very high level, and we're starting to get down into the weeds a little bit. And the report that we made at the end of June, we focused on 4 big issues that need to be addressed, and they all cost money. Resiliency, the redeveloping the public spaces downtown, the Hillman Garage, and Main Street paving. And as we've had further discussions, I think we've become more sensitized to another issue that we really ought to try to address for Annapolis and has a real impact on tourism, and that's the need to get rid of the ugly wires overhead. And I think that's something that we ought to add to the pile of things that need to be done to take Annapolis into the 21st century. So what needs to be done? Well, we've looked at it in terms of 3 bites: a short term, an intermediate term, and a mid-range term. The short term is we need to do some things right away to carry through on the commitment that this time we really do mean business. We need to do something. As Eileen said earlier, we don't want to do another report, another study, and put it on the shelf. We need to get something done. And there's some low-hanging fruit that you've heard already mentioned. And what we need to do is get moving on these low-hanging pieces of fruit and have some early victories. And early victories will then lead to the ability to do some of these intermediate and mid-range things and keep the momentum up. So those easy things, low-cost things, we want to do right away. The signage, the app, to get a better handle on what's going on in the parking world right away that will have an immediate impact. Intermediate term is the Hillman Garage. The city is aggressively trying to move forward on that, and we are willing to work with the city in their efforts to come up with a way to do the Hillman Garage. I don't think it's a lot of heavy lifting. The Hillman Garage can be done in many different ways, and what we need to do is figure out which is the best approach for the city to take and then get moving on that project. And then the mid-range is the resiliency to deal with the fact that if we don't do anything, in 50 years, downtown will be underwater. And if we don't do anything with Annapolis downtown underwater, we won't have the tourists coming to us. So this is a top priority, to get the city well prepared to deal with the 21st and even probably the 22nd century. And that's going to involve a lot of effort on resiliency, and yes, that's expensive. Don't want to dwell too much on the intermediate these immediate actions we've talked about, but there are many things that we need to do to get a better handle on parking, and I've been a strong advocate of trying to get our hands around what is our long-term parking strategy plan. We need to do a thorough professional study of our parking needs, do a strategic plan, and do that sooner rather than later. But in the meantime, the signage, the app, all these things, these easy, small victories will start to show the public and the other levels of government that will be an important part of our success, that we really do mean business this time. As far as the immediate action, again, this strategic parking plan is an absolute necessity. It'll cost $50,000, and it's money that the city really should step up to the plate and advance to show, again, the other levels of government that we do mean business, and to show the public that we mean business. And this is, in the overall scheme of things, as far as the city budget is concerned, $50,000 is a literal drop in the bucket. So we really would be prepared to get involved with this strategic plan. As far as the intermediate action, the Hillman Garage, important to have that study so we know what size to build that garage, and to come up with a financing plan. There are many options, as I said, to the financing plan, and they should be able to throw off additional cash to help support the other capital improvements, infrastructure improvements that are necessary. And then the enhanced public space at the City Dock, the Susan Campbell Park. There are lots of infrastructure improvements, and it will be tied very closely into the resiliency plan. But we've estimated that doing some of the pedestrian improvements somewhere around $4 million, I mean, somewhere in the Historic Annapolis has received a $4 million grant to deal with the Burtis House and other things, but these public improvements can be done at a relatively modest cost and have a great enhancement to the downtown area. And then the mid-range plan, the resiliency construction, this capital improvement is absolutely necessary to assure the city's success. There are many estimates right now. We're sort of flying a little bit blind. Minimum cost probably $15 million. It could be substantially more, but we think that we should take a long and hard look at a mechanism to assist the city and maybe take the leadership in the overall financing efforts. And this is the concept of establishing a Capital City 21st Commission, which would be a quasi-public entity that would be initiated by some legislation at the state legislature that would give us the ability to set this commission up and serve as the driver to provide the funding tools for these capital improvements that are necessary. We've identified some other sources of long-term funding that would allow you, the city, or this commission to be able to borrow funds and pay them back over a 30-year period. And when I made my presentation at the June 26th meeting, I pointed out that for $3 million annually for 30 years, you can support public debt of $50 million, which ought to be plenty of funds to do the resiliency work downtown and the public improvements, at the same time to provide whatever minimal assistance, if any, the Hillman Parking Garage would require. And we think there are sources of funds that can be tapped into: additional taxes, not so much paid by the existing residents. One of the things we've thrown out is perhaps taking a look at the hotel tax as a source of additional funding, and to working with the state and with the county to have the ability to get an incremental amount from the hotel tax to provide that minimal $3 million annually to support the borrowing that would be necessary to do these improvements. So we're going to continue to work and work with both the county government and the city government and the state government to make this a success that it absolutely has to be.
I want to leave all of you, as we turn this over to your questions, with Joe Riley's quote, "The success of a city depends on its willingness to reimagine its future." So with that said, we will be, the rest of the summer, having some more outreach. The teams will be identifying phasing strategies, and in September, we'll be meeting with the Planning Commission. City Dock Action Committee will meet again. We'll be having our community-wide outreach, and we look forward to your questions.
Alderman Tierney.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Mayor. He's given me the opportunity to just say a few words regarding the parking. So after this presentation, you can see why I am delighted that Historic Annapolis and the city has taken this on with the leadership of Eileen Fogarty. It's so impressive to see these volunteers put in the man hours for a common place for all of our city residents, family, friends, and visitors. One of the working teams is the parking team, and they are tasked with reimagining parking at City Dock, with or without a new garage or City Dock parking and other variables and challenges. And we need to support them in this effort. I bring this up now because, as you all know by now, I proposed a fee increase to the walk-up meters that currently exist at City Dock, concurrent with this year's fiscal year 2020 budget. If passed Monday night, it would be effective immediately. I admit the messaging could have been better. Unfortunately, anything with the word parking goes viral and gets sensationalized, not helped with my words of doubling or demand pricing. I introduced it as such, but in that it only affects 5% of available off-street parking within a 3/4 mile radius of City Dock. It is not any such comprehensive implementation that I know the ULI will present with any loss of parking. So why now, and why not wait? It is important that this experience is preceding the ULI plan, as most of the reaction that I've received is, what about the broken meters, and where are the signs, and where is there another shuttle, and why isn't there another enforcement car in Parole or Eastport? That is the daily and present responsibility of the city. And as we learned in the budget proceeding, we simply need more revenue relief in the parking fund to accommodate this daily and present need. And also, to move forward on a plan such as yours, the city has to have the confidence of its residents that we are prepared. This increase in revenue will assist in meeting those needs. It will come to a vote on Monday, as I do not want it to be misconstrued with any demand pricing plan of the ULI, and the sooner we have this revenue, the better for planning and being in an overdue financially healthier position for its implementation. So thank you for the opportunity to clarify, because I may have to disagree with Mr. Hammond in that $50,000 right now as we speak today in the parking fund is not a drop in the budget. So I really would support this rate increase that is only $3 an hour versus the previous $4 and $2 when it's off season. So thank you for the opportunity to clarify that.
Thank you. Have some questions? Alderwoman Pindell-Charles.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Ms. Fogarty, as well as your team. This has been exceptional. I really learned a lot at the last meeting you had that our Chief of Staff encouraged us to go to, and I was so glad that I came. I wanted to ask you, would you be amenable to having a representative from your team come and speak to anyone, or maybe one community association and award?
Absolutely. We have an outreach team,
okay,
and we will be glad to do that.
Okay, good. I may be calling on you. Thank you.
Any other questions? Fantastic stuff. Thank you so much. It really is impressive. I want to thank you all again for all the hours and hours that you've given to this thing. This is going to be the real thing this time, right? We're going to get it across the line. We're going to get it done. There's a lot of talent that I'm looking at right now that we're lucky to have. So, Alderwoman Pindell-Charles. Yeah.
Mr. Mayor, do you have maybe a one-pager that I could send to a community association to kind of give them an overview of what you may be speaking to the community association about?
That's a good idea. The answer is we don't, but we will.
Okay, great.
So
Let me know.
I'll put something together.
Okay, let us know.
So because, we've got all of this, but I think one page of bullet points would be super.
Yeah. Our Greater Parole Community Association executive leadership team meets once a month. They had their monthly meeting yesterday, but they do meet quarterly, and the next quarterly meeting is at the end of August. So I cannot speak for them to say what that would be an appropriate time to come, but I certainly, once you send me the one pager, I can send it to them and they can make a decision as to how they want to proceed.
Great. I'll be here then. I'll be glad to go.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Savage.
Yeah, and just to echo my colleague, I think that's a great idea. I'm going to be having a community, not so much a meeting, although I do normally have them quarterly, but it's going to be more of just a party gathering. But if you have any information that I could share, probably mostly passively for this meeting, but in the future, I will definitely keep the outreach in mind, because I'll probably have more of a traditional town hall in September, although it looks like you may be finished with a report in September.
So we are hoping in September to have the end of September another broad-based community outreach meeting, but we would be delighted, I would be delighted to participate in any way in a meeting you might have. Our goal is to have the recommendations in October.
Okay, excellent. Thank you.
Thank you. And the next meeting that's available to the public, where the public, what date is that, please? Yeah. The next public meeting
so there will be a community planning commission work session. I believe it is the 4th of September, Thursday, September 4th. The end of September, we're going to have another large outreach meeting, which we hope we get a few hundred people again. That'll probably be the last week in September. And the City Dock Action Committee workshop will be, my guess is, the second or third week in September. We'll get those dates set in the next couple weeks.
Thank you. Go on. Thank you so much. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. City Attorney, next item on the agenda.
The agenda is completed.
Agenda is completed. Anything else for good order, anybody? Sorry. Agenda is completed.
I move that we adjourn.
Okay. We don't have to vote on that at a special session.
Second.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Thank you.